Dobar dan, dobri ljudi. Moje ime je Milan Vilić, a vi ste na kanalu Vilić Zapisi 2. Hvala svima koji svojim prilozima podržavaju rad kanala i omogućavaju da kroz ovo vreme putujemo zajedno. Ovo ispade ovako ko u Radovanom trećem, Kristina je 7 godina trudna. Rat nije počeo noćas, a možda počne ove noći, možda ne tamo druge noći. Vidim da su se neki malo izgleda zbunili oko onog Messinga i njegovog pisma, navodnog. Pazite, to ništa nije provereno. U kojem se govori da će 26. februara Putin doneti odluku. Ako je pismo autentično, Putin je doneo odluku, a kada će se po toj odluci nešto učiniti i kakva će realizacija biti, to ćemo gledati u narednim danima. A do tada da vidimo šta se aktualno dešava. Dešava se to da su ponovo počeli sukobi između Pakistana i Afganistana. Ta granica između Pakistana i Afganistana je povučena, pronašao sam 1893. Zove se Durandova linija, Englezi ko ovi drugi. Oni to tako lepo povuku da su i s jedne i s druge strane granice Paštuni. Ovi afganistanski. I naravno, Pakistan tu liniju smatra definitivno međunarodnom granicom. Afganistan tu nikada nije dao priznanje toj granici. I tu će se sukobi nastaviti do ovog. Interesantno je da ti to dosta žestoki sukobi počinju upravo sad. Znači, idemo polako da vidimo kompletan taj region, to područje ogromno, kako to počinje polako sve da vri. Kada smo već u tom kraju, što bi se reklo, ulazimo u indijski podkontinent, samo da poslušamo indijskog premijera Modija šta on priča.
They hold firmly that Israel is their fatherland and India their motherland. We are democracies shaped by history and focus on the future. Our partnership is grounded in shared experience and shared aspirations. Our strong partnership not only serves national interests but also contributes to global stability and prosperity.
Znači, oni su rođeni sa Izraelcima, bio je u Knesetu, govor iz Kneseta, vidjeli ste ovacije i aplauz koji je polučio. I sad zamislite šta zaista da radi i Kina i Rusija sa takvima koji su ljige obično. Ogromna zemlja, šta da radi, moraš nekakve odnose razvijaš. Još i Rusija izašla u susret zbog ovih sankcija koje je Zapad uvezao na rusku naftu, pa sad Rusiji isporučuju Indiji tu naftu, ona to prepakuje pa prodaje Zapadu, masno zaradila. Još su napravili sporazum da u rupijima oni to Rusima plaćaju. Sad Rusi ne znaju šta da rade, a ovo imaju ogromnu količinu rupija, ne mogu da povuku robe. Sad iz Indije sirovine imaju sve što kvalitetnih stvari koje bi Rusiji trebale. I tako i nije lako biti ruski car ili kineski. Sa Kinezima isti slučaj, oni se malo pa potuku tamo isto na granici, na Himalajima, ali sve u svemu vi vidite da se to polako diže, podgreva i strane opredeljuju. Ja stvarno ne mogu da razumem stav Indije i njeno opredeljenje za Izrael u čitavoj ovoj priči. Naravno, oni imaju pravo na svoj stav i svoj izbor i trpeće sve posljedice tog izbora. Indija se vrlo intenzivno razvija ekonomski, zaista. U nekim granama, pogotovo u oblasti IT-a, imaju odlične uspehe. Međutim, ja ne vidim sreću i prosperitet na način na koji to Kina trenutno radi. A šta bi izgledao, odnosno kakav bi izgledao stav Kine u mogućem nekom sukobu? Ajde da poslušamo malo kako to izgleda.
If you want to have war, you will get war. If you want to destroy China, you will be destroyed. If you want to impose nuclear war on China, you will be wiped out by nuclear war. This is very serious. China's policy is very clear. China will not fire the first shot, but China will not allow you to fire the second shot. No country in China's neighborhood is a match against China in terms of military power. China's military buildup is a matchup against only one country, that is the United States. China will never allow the United States to launch a war against China, conventional or nuclear, without suffering devastating consequences. If you have not watched the Victory Day parade in Beijing on September the 3rd, one of the weapons China demonstrated, we call it 61, because it can contain 60 nuclear warheads plus one hydrogen bomb. Now, in the world of today, let me tell you, which country has hydrogen bomb? China is the only country with hydrogen bomb. And that ICBM can cover every corner of the world in less than 20 minutes and destroy any target in any corner of the world without any possibility of being intercepted. I hope Washington has learned the lesson. If you want to have war, you will get war. If you want to destroy China, you will be destroyed.
Ja ne znam da li je moguće biti, što se kaže, jasniji. Da li je moguće biti jasniji? Koja je pozicija Kine? Pa ne konstatuju dali dvojku, što se kaže, Amerikancima. Ni na koji način im ne izlaze u susret u svim ovim njihovim baljezganjima, a ta baljezganja, pošto taj zapad generalno još uvek ima ogroman monopol i moć i uticaj u svetskim mas medijima, ovo vam neće pustiti, niti će to komentarisati. Ili ako to bude uradio, uradit ću onako usput i bagatelišući. Tom zapadu će zaista biti potrebna očigledna nastava. Kina je životno zainteresovana da Iran preživi. Iranska pozicija u odnosu na Afganistan, jer je to jako bitno, vidite na karti taj geografski raspored, Kina može do Irana doći jedino preko Afganistana. To je njen pre svega ekonomski interes. Jer ta ruta, ako se kvalitetno izgradi, a Kinezi mogu sada izgrade šta im na pamet padne, imaju tehnologije, imaju masu, imaju kapital, mogu da zidaju, a vole, obožavaju da zidaju. i brzu prugu i autoput i sve će do Persijskog zaliva probiti samo ako bude mirna situacija, da to mogu na miru da urade. I ta linija se neverovatno povezuje na tu liniju sever-jug od Kaspija ka Indiji. Jer Indija, kakve god da i političke stavove ima, ona je ogromna zemlja koja nema nikakvu mogućnost da u bilo kakav ozbiljniji sukob uđe, možda sa Pakistanom, to je tradicionalno bilo, sa Bangladešom su već dosta dugo mirni, od kako je bio onaj sukob 70. godina, kada je taj takozvani istočni Pakistan postao Bangladeš. Indija dosta moćnu armiju ima i izgrađuje i puno investira u nju, kupuje to rusko oružje. Izgleda su neki aranžman napravili za, ne znam, 30 i nešto ovih Suhoja 57 hoće da sklapaju, jer su ovi francuski Rafali koje mi treba da dobijemo desetkovani bili u posljednjem sukobu sa Pakistanom. Onaj lovac kineski je to sve čas posla spustio na zemlju. Toliko vizionarstvu našeg nepomnjenika. Ali pokušavam da vas polako uvedem u sve ovo što će biti aktuelno oko Amerike i Izraela i Irana, gde neku procenu situacije, po meni dosta kvalitetnu, i neki stav nekog unutrašnjeg vrenja u političkom prostoru Sjedinjenih Američkih Država je dao Tucker Carlson.
Well, in between the Super Bowl halftime show and Epstein and the Winter Olympics, most Americans probably weren't aware that we are on the verge of a massive regional war in the Middle East, if not a third world war. We are. The largest movement of American military hardware is since 2003, the Iraq invasion, is now in or steaming toward the Persian Gulf off Iran, preparatory to what could be the aforementioned war. Now, most people, once again, probably didn't know this. Those who did know it weren't for it. The recent polls on this question, are you for a war with Iran? It's about 1 in 5 Americans support it. The rest are probably asking, war with Iran? Why would we have a war with Iran? They said no idea. The president did address it last night in his State of the Union and at a press conference. And he said in public what he basically says in private, Trump being one of those rare public figures who's pretty much the same behind closed doors as he is on stage. He says pretty much the same stuff. He's a little funnier in private, but basically he's not a different guy. He's the same guy. And he's been saying the same thing about Iran for a long time. Really two things. One, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. He says it again and again. He really means it. That's not a talking point. It's completely sincere. And two, I would prefer a negotiated settlement. I would prefer peace rather than war. And that's obviously true. So to bottom line, where we are right now at the end of February 2026 on this looming Iran war, seems likely. Have all those aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, planes ready, missiles ready, but it's not certain because the president hasn't decided to do it. And you may not get that impression either from watching the news. There is this sense that it's inevitable. And that's kind of a psyop, actually, designed to make you think there's nothing you can do about it. No, Trump has not decided to do this. Again, seems likely. All the momentum is in that direction. But the president's the sole decider on this question. He's the commander-in-chief. And he's showing no obvious signs of enthusiasm. And why would he? There are a lot of reasons not to do this. The first being the one just mentioned, which is most Americans don't want it. And though it's not a direct democracy, it's a form of democracy, and you probably shouldn't commit history-changing acts without the support of your people. And Trump feels that way. This is someone who pays very close attention to, say, TV ratings. Why is that? Not just because he worked in TV, but because he thinks they're a pretty good measure of what people are interested in. He cares about what people think. and he's willing to listen to almost anybody. So that's a good reason not to do it. The public's not behind you. Maybe you've got great reasons to do it that they don't know about yet, but we haven't heard those, and the president hasn't really explained them other than to say Iran is bad. Yes, that's been the official U.S. position since 1979. Iran can have nukes. That's always been the president's position, and we would like some kind of settlement. The reason he's not eager to start this war is because he, in general, isn't eager to start wars, hasn't been anyway, but because this would be a particularly tough war. This is the largest buildup since the Iraq War, but Iran is not Iraq. It's much, much, much bigger and much more technologically advanced. The population of Iran is about 92 million. In 2003, almost exactly 23 years ago, when we rolled into Baghdad, the population of Iraq was 25 million. So Iran is more than 3 times bigger. The landmass of Iran is multiple, 6 times bigger. It's huge. It's a huge, pretty advanced country compared to Iraq. So that's a problem right there. This is a serious thing to start a war with a real country. Are we in a position to do that? Well, there's some debate about that. The U.S. military performs in a remarkable way under certain circumstances. But is the U.S. military right now ready for a prolonged conflict with a big country? No, it turns out. And these are facts taken from open source material that have been published. They're on the internet. You can look it up. None of this is classified. This is all out there. But current estimates suggest that the United States is so low on some munitions, partly because we've used them in the defense of Israel already in the last 12 months. But whatever the cause, the United States is so low on certain kinds of munitions that were we to have even a brief but intense engagement with Iran, our military would not be ready for like 10 years to fight a real war against, a peer or near peer adversary. So out the window would go any hope of defending Taiwan. Whether or not it's a good idea is kind of, up to you to decide. But that would not even be on the table because we wouldn't be able to. We would be much weakened by this because we don't have the stockpiles and we don't have the necessary industrial capacity to replace them quickly. So we are not in a position to have a lengthy engagement, and everyone at the Pentagon who's gaming this out understands that. And again, this has been reported publicly, though not necessarily in the New York Times or the Washington Post, at least not on the front page, but it's widely known. So it'd be a tough war. We're not in a great place to fight it right now. And the potential downsides are absolutely real. Lots of things could happen. There are tens of thousands of Americans in the region, of course, in uniform and out. They could be hurt or killed. There's Israel, our ally, which is probably a little more vulnerable than we pretend it is to conventional attacks from ballistic missiles. Do the math on how many missiles Iran is believed to have versus how many anti-ballistic missiles Israel has, or we have to defend Israel. They could be in trouble. And then there's a question of what happens to Iran. Like, does it fall apart? Does it disintegrate as a country? To be clear, as of tonight, there is no Israeli plan for what comes the day after we depose the Ayatollah, knock out the leadership of the country. What happens then? You're going to put in the former king's son or something? No one believes that's real. Will the country hang together with Pahlavi on the throne? Come on. No one is thinking this through because the people pushing this clearly don't care what happens after. The point is to take out Iran as a coherent country, not to protect Israel, but in order to sweep Iran aside as a regional rival. Once Iran is gone, there's no question as to who controls the Middle East. It, of course, would be the only nuclear-armed power in the Middle East, Israel.
Da vam ja ne prepričavam Carsona, on je onako američki, jednostavan i krajnje pragmatičan, sve je objasnio. Da se nadovežemo samo na tu mogućnost u perspektivi tog koridora sever-jug, koji je planiran i kada povežemo taj koridor sa koridorom koji je Kina spremna da radi prema Iranu, mi možemo nedvosmisleno da izvedemo zaključak da je taj sukob u svom, kako bih rekao, u svom glavnom cilju ima suzbijanje mogućnosti da dođe do daljeg bujanja i prosperiteta evroazijskog kontinenta. I zbog toga je između ostalog Iran ključan, a Izrael ima svoje neke crvenoteleće ideje u celoj toj priči. I vi vidite koliko je to jedna kompleksna situacija koja stvarno ne zna čovjek šta da kaže. Ali evo da vidimo šta kaže, na primjer, Pepe Escobar o koridorima koje bi bilo moguće izgraditi.
Instead of talking about war, let's talk about what Iran and Eurasia are doing.
Yeah.
And that brings us to, you saw it, you told me that you saw it.
Just let me play a part of it.
Please play a part of it for our audience, and then please explain to them. You can go to the site of Press TV and you can watch the full documentary. It's very, very easy. It's now uploaded. It's now online on Press TV's website. Please, Nima.
Yeah.
Some places can't be understood just by looking at a map. You have to walk them, breathe the air, listen to the signs hidden in their sign. Iran is one of those places. I'm Pepe Escobar, geopolitical analyst. For decades, I followed countless trails where power moves, from the west down to the east. But no land has gripped my mind the way Iran has. Rooted in history, yet always reaching toward the future. And a land that once again just might rewrite the rules of the game. So here I am, searching for something that's been largely overlooked and unheard. It's imperative to come to the brain of Iran's decision-making, where maps are drawn and pieces in the chessboard are moved. Tehran is not just the capital of Iran. It may soon become the capital of a new Eurasian project, somewhere between Shanghai and St. Petersburg. Around 2,500 years ago, the Achaemenid Empire built a royal road, a 2,500-kilometer long route stretching from Susa to Sardis. This grand artery symbolized mastery over land routes and facilitated trade between great empires. During the Sasanian era, the Silk Road, Asia's vital lifeline, ran through the heart of, where else? Iran. Caravans of silk, spices, and precious goods moved along these paths, carrying with them cultures, ideas, and civilizations. In the Middle Ages, Islamic empires expanded both land and sea routes. The ports of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman became Iran's gateways to the world. Today, Iran sits at a strategic crossroads between the Caspian Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the overland routes of the Caucasus and Central Asia. It is striving to transform the north-south and east-west corridors into powerful interconnected arteries, routes that carry not only commerce, but the shifting weight of regional and global geopolitics.
Yeah.
Well,
Just
this is
part of it.
this is let's say a little bit of the starter where we set the scene for our trip. And because we went to the Caspian, then we crossed Iran, we went to the Persian Gulf, to the Sea of Oman, to the port of Chabahar, and we ended on the maritime Iran-Pakistan border. So for all of you, our audience, this was an extraordinary adventure for a foreigner. Don't forget, the Iranians trusted a foreigner to tell the story of the most important connectivity corridor in their modern history that they are building with the Russians and with the Indians, the International North-South Transportation Corridor. That's the theme of our documentary. And for me, it was an immense honor and a humbling experience. It's fascinating for all of you to see really on the ground, how do you build a connectivity corridor in the 21st century? It's an absolutely outstanding experience involving three BRICS, very, very important: Russia, Iran, and India. And this is parallel to the Chinese Silk Roads, of course. So this documentary is focused on the North-South corridor because it's the first one in English in the world that starting to tell the story of this new corridor.
Možemo, barem ja, imam tu pretenziju da mogu da zaključim da po kojim god parametrima da ukrstimo, što bi se reklo, zapadna paradigma je mrtva, ali ona toga još nije svesna. Odnosno, ta svest o tome da je taj koncept u potpunosti promašen, da su Sjedinjene Američke Države ostale zakopane u 20. veku, a ovo je dobrano zagazilo u 21. gdje su Sjedinjene Američke Države kao motor i osovina tog zapada zaostale u razvoju u odnosu pre svega na Kinu i Rusiju, a onda i sve one koji se tome priključuju. I to je jaz koji objektivno nije moguće više prevazići. Teorijski, Amerikanci bi morali da rade bar 3 put bolje, uspešnije, vrednije i produktivnije od Kineza, da bi imali pretenziju za jedno 30-40 godina da ih stignu. Nikad ih više neće stići. I u nekoj perspektivi, ako ovo ne prođe kao jedna globalna kataklizma, jer ludaci još uvek to mogu da urade, i ja zato govorim već godinama, da kada bi postojala mogućnost nekada se njih razoruža, da ih se odvoji od oružja, vi bi vidjeli gdje su oni. No, vidjet ćemo, kažem, ako ne dođe do te sveopšte kataklizme, oni će vrlo brzo postati područje kao danas zemlje trećeg sveta. Vrlo brzo. O Evropi da ne govorim. Evropa je svoj istorijski hod završila, ulazi u istorijske čitanke, neko u 22. 23. veku će nekada govoriti o tome, bit će onako lepe, interesantne priče o ratovima koji se dešavali u Evropi, ali ona u bilo kakvom ekonomskom, onda naravno i političkom smislu kao faktor koji se nekoga dotiče na ovoj planeti neće postojati. Tu će izrasti neke druge velesile koje objektivno to i treba da urade, jer je došlo vreme da na istorijsku pozornicu stupe oni koji su već veoma, veoma dugo tlačeni, a imaju jedan izuzetan kreativni potencijal da zaista živimo u jednom i svetskom miru i u jednom raju koji sami sebi možemo da obezbedimo, pogotovo što je u toku jedna neviđena tehnološka revolucija u kojoj pre svega Kina preuzima primat. Mnogi ovde, to sam primetio, imaju animozitet prema Kinezima. Nisu se, ne mogu da kažem, oni najbolje postavili prema nama. Međutim, postoji ogromna propaganda i podstrekivanje unutar naše zemlje koje je upereno protiv Kine i meni uopšte nije teško da pretpostavim iz čije je to kuhinje dolazi. Kinezi su spremni i u više mahova iskazali spremnost da budu vrhunski i odani partneri Srbije. To što mi to ne znamo da uradimo ili podmećemo klipove u te stvari. Kina nema vremena da se bavi idiotima. Onako, usput će nešto da odradi. U svakom slučaju nisu neprijatelji Srbije. I tu se tako neverovatno lako u našem prostoru pobrkaju ti lončići i ko ti je neprijatelj. A mi imamo situaciju da naše vojstvo je trenutno van zemlje. Pazite, rat nije ove noći, ne znam da li će ove noći ili koje noći počeći. Ali u takvoj situaciji tebi je predsjednik države u Kazahstanu, a predsjednica Skupštine negdje u Evropi mlati praznu slamu, to radi. Znači, što zamislite, počne rat, ti dve glavne ličnosti u zemlji nemaš. Mislim da po ustavu Ano Brnabić menja prvi potpredsjednik Skupštine. Mislim da ih ima 5, da se tako ređaju. Ne, Đuro Macuc će da nas vodi kroz olujno more. Mislim, ludilo. I sad ćeš ti nešto da kažeš zemlji koja ne da je u 21. veku, nego to je nevjerovatno. Ali to su naše gluposti, nisu jedine, ima i ko hoćete, pa pokušat ćemo da nekako živimo s tim i da izvučemo živu glavu iz svega ovoga. Mislim da je bilo dosta. Sve vas pozdravljam i volim za Carstvo nebesko u slobodnoj Srbiji. Živeli.